thank you for the intro. As you already said, my name is Chris, and this is joint work with Anya and Thomas. And the topic of my talk is blackholing at IXPs on the effectiveness of DDoS mitigation in the wild. So DDoS attacks are around since, let's say, almost 2 decades. We have like hundreds or thousands of research efforts and papers published in this domain. But we didn't make a lot of progress so far. So what we have is new attacks and new negative reports hitting the news almost daily. So we got skyrocket DDoS attacks in 2015, even though those news tend to be skewed a little bit since it's from protection vendors, and we see new traffic volumes hitting like the 400 gigabits per second volumes. So this is really a concern for industry, but also for research. And so far there are also coming new mitigation services by big companies such as Prefixes, and a lot of stuff is going on in this domain. But there's been defense or mitigation technique which is around quite a while, and this is blackholing. So blackholing is an operational technique to counter DDoS attacks. And how it works is, if my service or servers is getting attacked, I can, as an operator, trigger directly my own blackholing, and this is done by announcing an IP prefix for blackholing. So it's done via BGP. And all traffic which is destined to this specific prefix is dropped then. So this is sort of a last resort to protect an upstream or peering link, and mainly designed to protect their own network. So this is not like a laundering traffic, it's more coarse grained, so drop all the traffic to a prefix or not. And this has been adapted by IXPs since a few years, so you can always also use it at IXPs. So in opposed to that, like the history started like 20 years ago or 35 years ago, operators started to install null routes for certain IP prefixes to get rid of unwanted traffic within their network. But they had to go to a single device, to a single router, to establish such rules or ACLs or whatsoever. And in 2002 it was sort of standardized, and what you could do by then is you could just centralize, use IBGP to do it within your AS, so you could trigger it for all your routers at the same time. And this technique has been adapted and extended between 2005 and 2007 by major ISPs, and they are offering blackholing as a service for their customers. So, and since 2010, IXP started to adapt the concept. The benefit, why you would rather do blackholing at IXPs, is you have just one centralized point where you announce blackholing to all your other peers. So you may reach 700 or 600, 500, depending on the size of the IXP networks at the same time, and you don't have to go to every single upstream provider as a network operator and to configure blackholing. So to be on the same ground, I briefly want to introduce how blackholing at an IXP works, and especially how or also how an IXP works, just on one slide. So here we got an IXP in the center, it's the cloud. This is the switching fabric of the IXP. And we got 4 edge routers of connected customers. We also have the route server, which is a sort of route reflector which distributes a route received by one AS to all, or by one member to all other members. And as we can see here, if the ASD is announcing a certain prefix to the route server is announcing it to all the other members in the simplest case. So what comes with the nature of BGP, that we have a next hop IP address, and this is by definition that the IXP has to be the own IP address, so the IP address of the edge router from ASD. So they all send their packets towards the switching fabric. This is by means of ARP translated into MAC address and then just transferring the frames over the IXP and to the ASD. So nothing special. Just note that we have on the one hand side the route server and the control plane, and on the other hand we have the data plane. So now, given the scenario that we have an AS with an evil customer, so an evil AS, which sends a considerable amount of DDoS traffic towards another AS. So this is a very bad situation for the AS, because there are multiple risks what could happen next. Either we have that ASD's connection to the IXP, so the peering link gets congested and we're going to have a lot of packet loss there. Or it could be that the network of ASD is experience congestions, and so the service for the customers can be disrupted. Or we have issues in applications or services running in the data center, which have trouble because of the DDoS attack. So note also that there's just, in this case, we have one member who is not really sending a lot of DDoS traffic towards ASD. So what ASD can do now, it can announce via the route server, which I removed here for simplicity reasons, an announcement or announce a prefix, and very likely more specific from the previously announcement. Like if ASD announced before, let's just say a /24, it can now announce a more specific, and if it's in host which is under attack, it can just announce a /32 prefix, so a host IP address. And this announcement contains as a next hop the Blackholing IP address. It's a distinct IP address which is well known and well defined. So it announces this more specific prefix over the IXP towards the customers, and it can be done in a very explicit manner, so that you can either whitelist or blacklist, so you can just announce it for all but, or for just some. And what happens is that the next hop IP address or the /32 is hopefully accepted by the other ASs, and it's takes the next hop IP, which is the well-defined IP, and this is rewritten in a well-defined MAC, and this is then blackholed at the switching fabric of the IXP. To be more specific, it's dropped at the the IXP switching fabric ingress interface by an ACL, which drops all the traffic destined to this specific MAC address. So what happens is that the ASD got rid of a lot of DDoS traffic, and there is more capacity for all other ASs they peer with and who do not send that much of traffic. One thing to note here is that mostly ASD would announce a more specific prefix, as I mentioned earlier, and this might be an issue because IXPs in general allow their customers to announce up to /24 prefixes, but not more specific because of explosion of routing information bases and stuff. So there is a rule which allows this for blackholing explicitly to be done up to /32. But at the other hand, all other ASs need to accept those more specific prefixes, which is not necessarily the case because they need to change their router configuration for this. I'm going to come back to this later. So since we now understand how blackholing at an IXP works and how it can be used as a mitigation tactic, we actually want to get more insights. So this renders questions such as, is it frequently used? I mean, this is quite a new service at IXPs, and we don't really know how many ASs are using it. and how is it used? Is it used for like small attacks, large attacks, for long durations, short durations? And we also want to know what the impact on traffic is. If we see those announcements, which are control plane, BGP, what is the impact on the traffic, on the data plane? And we also want to know how we can improve this blackholing service for the customers. How can we make it more efficient, or what are the current shortcomings? So therefore, we did a measurement study, and we measured blackholing announcements on the control plane at the route server. So the route server comes with a looking glass, and we captured about 23,000 announcements over a 3-month period. And what we did in the first step is just, okay, we plotted here the announcements over the time. And this is the average value per day. So what we can see is there is a stable number of active /32 black hole announcements. /32 is the upper blue line. So we see like almost all the time a very stable number of 1,200. And we also see, surprisingly, less specifics announced, so up to /18. Okay, we just see 50, like around 50 announcements over the time, but this is a bit surprising, since we would have expected to see very specific prefixes. As we now see that blackholing is used and that there is an active number of announcements over all the time, we might want to have a look, okay, how is the usage pattern in terms of how many new announcements do we see per day? And for the 2 clusters, I have here also the new announcements, and we see that there's a really high variance. For the /32, not too much. What we see is like between 100 and 1,000 new announcements per day, and this is just counting. If someone is announcing something for blackholing, I just increase my counter by 1. So it doesn't tell us how long it's staying there, and we see a very spiky less specifics, the red solid line, and we even have one very high peak which goes up to more than 600 announcements at one day. And one would expect now that we would see an impact on the active announcements, the dashed lines, that there should also be spikes. But the nature of new announcements could be very different. For instance, this huge spike was just announced for several minutes and several times in a row for several minutes, which sums up to a very high number. So the first takeaway we got here is blackholing is indeed widely used at our Vantage IXP. But this also renders the question, which prefix sizes are actually announced for blackholing? I mean, we have the 2 clusters here, but let's just go and check for all the announcements. So here we can see the number of announcements in log scale, and we can see the prefix length on the x-axis in bits. So, and we see clearly that mainly /32 prefixes are announced. It's up to 97% of all the announcements are just /32. But we can also see, and this is a bit the surprising part, that there's in the range of /24 to /31, that this accounts for 2.5% of all announcements. So we see indeed that also larger IP address portions are announced for blackholing, and all traffic destined to those will be discarded. And we also see now 9 announcements less specific than /24, so which is really a huge IP address space. And I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier, that we really need to assure that the operators allow /32 blackholing announcements. So the more specific acceptance is really needed, because it's very often used. So the next question is like, okay, we just have the announcements here, but for how long do they last then typically? So What we plotted here is we see the fraction of total announcements on the y-axis, and on the x-axis the duration. It's log scale again, and if we focus, for instance, at one of the upper dots there, then we see that, for instance, all announcements that the announcements that lasted 10 minutes accounted for almost 10%. So what we see in general is that the majority is rather short-lived, like about 50% last less than 3 hours of all /32 announcements. But we also see a very long tail there. We see that the longest observed announcement was 76 days over a measured period of 90 days, but we just consider here announcements where we caught really the beginning and the end. So all others were gone. I also saw announcements which were present for like the entire period of 90 days, but we are not too sure how long they lasted in total, so we took those out for this plot. And if we now consider the other prefixes, we basically see the same. So what you see here is you don't see anything. Like, okay, obviously there are more short-lived ones, but we also have a lot of long-lived ones, even for the large prefixes such as /24, which lasted for over 50 days. And this is quite long for such a huge prefix. So as we just counted here the active duration, this could, for instance, like if we focus on the 10-minute data point, where we have got a fraction of almost 10%, this could also be the same prefix actually. So that's why we continue to just focus on the unique prefixes per AS. So here we have log scale again, the number of new announcements per prefix, like how often got one prefix announced. And on the x-axis we see the anonymized ASs. So what we can see here is that most prefixes announced only once or between 2 and 3 times in general. As we like the box plot shows that most of this stuff is below 10 announcements for one prefix. However, this is somewhat surprising that you would announce it for up to 10 times and that there are so many outliers, and the most far off outlier we could see is about 623 times. So 623 times announced the same prefix. And this is because operators lack insights into black hole traffic. So black hole traffic, they turn it on, traffic gets discarded, and they don't know what's going on. So they need to switch it off, see if the volumes are acceptable, and they have to turn it on again. And they do it frequently, and I talked to some operators and they were stating that they semi-automated it, some almost automated it, but other operators again just really do it in a manual manner. So just to see briefly what's the impact on traffic, I just plotted the traffic for one AS. It's the green solid line. This is one port at the IXP for an AS, and we see the traffic that goes. And we see the vertical dotted line, which is an announcement for a /32 prefix, so just one host IP. And what we can see is that the traffic starts to spike. The green line, or basically all the lines, are really spiking up to 17.6 gigabits per second. And then the blackholing is announced for the /32, and all the traffic is dropping. The solid line for the entire member, the dashed red line for the encompassing /16, and what we see, the yellow line is actually the /32, which is black holed. But what we also can see is, like, after the blackholing, we see that there's still here some traffic that is not black holed, which still goes to the /32. while the dashed blue line, the lowest line, is the traffic that goes to the black hole. So we could believe in the first place that the amount missing here should all go in the blackholing, so we would expect the blue line to be higher up and the yellow line almost to zero. But this is not the case because first of all, TCP sessions break, so we're going to lose some traffic anyway, and also because some members do not accept /32 announcements, and we really end up with the issue here that still traffic is going to the prefix, which should actually not happen anymore. But we can also see, indeed, the blackholing is effective and it converges to a neglectable amount of traffic. Here just very quick, the port mix which we have here, and we see really when the attack or supposedly attack, with blackholing we never know, we just see that someone is announcing something for blackholing, so not necessarily a DDoS attack but very likely. So we just looked into the port mix and we see that there's a strange port 1194 which receives the majority of the traffic, and before the announcement or before the start of the attack we didn't see we almost didn't see any traffic going to this port. So let me quickly summarize our findings. And we found 23,000 announced black holes over a 3-month period, which is quite heavy usage. And we observed a stable number of 1,200 active black holes over the time, where we could even find less or the least specific was a /18, and very diverse announcement patterns. So we saw high frequency, like on off. We saw also ASs that just used announce one prefix 1 or 2 times, and we saw very long durations, but mainly we saw short durations. Short durations, there are more details in the paper, how you can combine the short durations with a frequency, so you see short durations correlate somehow with a high frequency, so on off all the time. And there's a lot of room for future work. First of all, we need to improve the situation for /32 blackholing announcements acceptance. We need some sort of standardized triggering because all IXPs implemented in a slightly different manner. And there needs to be some sort of black hole monitoring just to really give the operators a clue and to help them not to use this very coarse-grained way of just turning on, turning it off again. And some sort of more fine-grained blackholing would be very interesting, since we saw probably in the case we investigated in the case study, just blocking traffic to port 1194 would have been enough. So that's it, and I'm happy to answer questions or to discuss and get some comments of you. Thank you.
So thanks, Chris. Any questions?
Thank you for your talk. Are there any possibilities for attackers to use blackholing as a method to mount a DDoS attack, as opposed to prefix hijacking? Second question is, are there any possibilities for attackers to mitigate the blackholing process?
Okay, so to first answer your first question is, I would say that there is not really a way to use it at an IXP to blackhole someone, because this is like directly connected within the IXP infrastructure, and the announcement is verified against the IRR database, and so you need to own a prefix to announce it. So, but of course, if there is a major flaw in BGP, we may end up to see things like that. And your second question, for an attacker, how to get around it? Yes, the advantage of blackholing is packets are silently discarded, so they can just observe TCP sessions break or stuff like that, and they could also do active measurements to see that this does not really work anymore. But first of all, it's very hard for them to know because there's no direct feedback which they receive. and how they could go around is like to manage the attack in a manner to not traversing the IXP anymore, to try to move the traffic to an upstream or to another IXP or something like that.
Maybe one more question on this one? Otherwise, let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.